A very good morning to you from the KTN News Center. Many thanks for joining us on the program this morning. This is Sunday edition as we dissect the big political stories this week. Of course, the big issues in the run-up to the general election on the 8th of August. Today being 57 days to August 8th when Kenyans go to the polls to elect their next set of leaders. And my guests are already here with me to take you through this program for the next 2 hours or so. Shall be talking about NASA versus Jubilee, the audit of the voter register by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Just how prepared is Kenya for the election on the 8th of August? We'll discuss all that, plus bring you the latest from the campaign trail, especially on the big one, the race to the presidency. This is Sunday edition. I am Ben Kitili. Welcome to the program. My guests are already here with me. I have with me Mutinda Kavemba, who is a Jubilee strategist. I have Hesbon Owila, a political analyst here, as well as Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
We couldn't have Professor Oiri Tumbo for this morning, but we have coming to us live from our Eldoret studios, Benson Cheserek, an independent candidate vying for the Marakwet West parliamentary seat. He shall be joining us live from the North Rift to just bring in his perspective on what has been happening there. Remember, President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto have been traversing that particular part of the country to woo their voters, that being considered their base, but has been very shaky in the last few weeks or so, them going there to try and calm the storms. We shall be taking a look at all that. But first, let's take a look at the political pages, starting with the political pages right away. Some of the headlines making political headlines in the newspapers this morning. Let's start with that issue. We shall be taking a look at it, gentlemen, in more detail. But on the Sunday Standard, that is a splash. Jubilee and NASA battle the enemy within. Fault lines, careless statements by party insiders have undermined efforts to present a united front. Dismas, what is your analysis of this?
Well, I think the party, or rather the political formation which should be concerned is NASA. Because in Jubilee, once President Kenyatta or the deputy president makes a position, it becomes law. Nobody has got serious political capital to dispute it. But when you go to NASA, the big problem is with Kalonzo Musyoka. It seems like he doesn't have the political muscles. He's not able to flex his political capital in Ukambani land to ensure that everybody is in order. Right. Like, for instance, when you see David Musila, and it's been reported in the newspapers today as having campaigned for Jubilee, that would be unacceptable in Luo Nyanza. If you say that in Luo Nyanza, then Raila will crack the whip, and before you know, you'll be bleeding. You no longer play politics. But now you have Mr. Muthama saying he has no time for Kalonzo Musyoka, yet he's going to support the candidate of Raila Odinga. And the gubernatorial race in Machakos, you can see the fingerprints of Muthama. All the tribulations of Wavinya Ndeti, you cannot afford not to see Muthama's fingerprints as well as Dr. Mutua. But it would be interesting for Raila Odinga to call Muthama and have him in order, because Kalonzo is not supposed to be campaigning anymore in Ukambani. He's supposed to be going outside looking for votes. But when Muthama raises a fire within his own constituency, then it becomes a bit of a challenge. But again, on the flip side, you have to give Kalonzo a pat on his back.
So NASA having a tougher battle than Jubilee in terms of putting their houses in order.
Yeah, because you see, like, for instance, I would be surprised if President Kenyatta would be worried about the Kiambu vote, because, you know, that one has already been sealed. But if you have somebody from Kiambu making a lot of noise and threatening to tilt the vote, then it will make President Kenyatta nervous, or even, say, in Luo Nyanza. So it seems to me that Kalonzo really needs to call these people to a roundtable conversation and ensure that everybody is dancing to his tune, which he's been able to do with Wavinya Ndeti, Kivutha Kibwana, and Charity Ngilu. But one wonders, when Muthama comes in and says, I have no time for Kalonzo Musyoka, yet I'm going to support Raila Odinga, and it's a joint ticket. You wonder whether, is he working for the interest of Kalonzo? Is he working for the interest of Raila Odinga? Or is he actually working for the interest of Mutinda Kavemba's political formation that has been told by Jubilee, go and create a fire for Kalonzo Musyoka back in the village? Right. But again, Kalonzo stands accused of making reckless statements, saying that if Muthama had gone to school, he would not be behaving in this particular manner. And you know, when you start casting aspersions on the integrity of somebody like Muthama, who has spent a lot of resources supporting your political party, it doesn't sit very well. But I think in the NASA link, it's very easy to come to the conclusion that Kalonzo Musyoka is the weakest link.
All right. Esbon, what is your analysis?
I think just like Dismas says, I think NASA seems to be having the bulk of the challenges in terms of dealing with the enemy within. And this is because I think as much as they have one presidential candidate, they have at least 4 or so very solid political parties in different regions. Ukambani, you have Wiper, then you go to parts of Western Kenya, you have Amani, and of course Ford Kenya, and then you come to Luo Nyanza, we have ODM. So there is a sense in which even if you're supporting Raila Odinga, chances are you're not in ODM, and therefore you'd want to win, to strengthen your party. And I think, just like I said earlier, I think a few weeks ago, that this is beyond Wiper. This is something that, as the NASA chief, Raila Odinga has to come in, and find an amicable solution on how they're going to go about this, especially in Western Kenya, particularly Kakamega region, and then, of course, Ukambani. On the Jubilee side, I think for Jubilee, it's relatively, manageable for the simple reason that you're either in the party or you're an independent. So Jubilee is not fighting any other party within that has clout. But increasingly, I think it's becoming a bit of a challenge for Jubilee, especially in Rift Valley, going by what is happening. And it's interesting that some people in Jubilee are perceived, to be supporting independent candidates, even in their pronouncements, which probably in the next few days will pan out quite differently for what Jubilee expects.
Of course, we shall be getting into that issue in the North Rift. Mutinda, why in Central, like Esbon is saying, we have Jubilee, and then we have people who lost to Jubilee and they are independent candidates. They're very clear. They're saying they're supporting the re-election of Uhuru Kenyatta. In ODM strongholds as well, we have some people trying to be independent and trying to fight for the attention of the party, but they are not supporting any other party. But in Ukambani, people who have lost or who have fallen out with the party leaders are supporting Jubilee, which is an enemy, so to speak, in that part of the world, of the country.
I think the only that is correct in relation to the remarks that were made by Musila. I don't think any of them has so far done that because Governor Mutua is chap. So him is not in.
I'm talking about the Kitui senator.
That's what I'm saying, Musila. That's why I'm saying that statement is true in relation to David Musila
and one Francis Nyanzi as well.
Francis Nyanze.
Yes.
And what I would say is there is a problem in Cumberland. And not only in Cumberland, because you see, unlike Jubilee, which is a single party, NASA is a coalition of parties. In some of these regions, these parties are in active competition. And in Cumberland, and actually that is where the differences between Kalonzo and Muthama began, is that Muthama wanted everybody to be in Wiper and then join NASA through Wiper. But what happened is that in Makueni, for instance, the incumbent governor, Professor Kivuta Kibwana, was elected on a Muungano ticket. So what he did is that he joined Wiper to be their gubernatorial candidate, but Muungano is very active on the ground competing against Wiper on issue of seats of MCAs and seats of members of the National Assembly. If you come to Machakos, Wavinya Ndeti vied on a CCU ticket in the last election. This time she left CCU and joined Wiper, but CCU is very active on the ground. And that is why some of the Wiper people are feeling cheated, that these people have only put on our shirt for their own convenience, but on the ground, they are making it very difficult for the rest of us, yet we are claiming to be one team. And that was the biggest problem that Muthama had with Kalonzo, and it is actually what has boiled to what we are now seeing, which is almost now open rebellion. Because if you go to Kitui again, yesterday I was listening to them when they were in water, and Raila, as he was doing his match thing, the football match, he had to make sure he mentions Ngilu and Malombe. That tells you something. And Malombe is the Wiper candidate. Ngilu has come as NAC, but they are almost getting equal. So some of these Wiper people probably have a good basis for feeling the way they are feeling, because they are feeling that these people have just come for their convenience, but they are not helping Wiper any other way other than them just getting whatever seats they want.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was.
Yeah, but Ben, you'd understand where Raila Odinga is coming from. Right now, his priority is not to get elected on an ODM ticket. He's interested in the presidential vote. And the same is the case for Kalonzo. So for Kalonzo, he's really interested in ensuring that the Kamba Nation as a bloc votes for him and Raila. So whatever happens to other seats, in as much as it may contribute to the revenues that Wiper would get, it doesn't really bother him. Which is why if you're a solid candidate within Muungano or Wiper or CCM, just go out and fight your own. Do not hope that you are going to win a parliamentary seat because you are clinging on Kalonzo's political capital. And it's the same thing that Esbon has mentioned in Kakamega. And Raila Odinga has been very clear that in Kakamega, he doesn't have a preferred candidate. So Boni Kalwale and Oparanya are going to fight it out. Whoever wins still is part of the NASA coalition.
Right.
And I think a number of these politicians or candidates, they should have the guts to go and campaign on their own without necessarily having to rely on their political party leaders.
All right. Is there any end to this, first of all, this Mudhama-Kalonzo feud that could give Jubilee, or could it give Jubilee the edge?
I think it's giving Jubilee, not even a slight edge, a considerable edge. Right. And, from where I see it, you'd look at what Mudhama was advocating for from a word go, and you'd understand that even with allegations and aspersions cast by Kalonzo Musyoka, that he actually foresaw this. You're better off if you fold all these other political parties and consolidate yourself in one political party. Because the moment you have, the key political leaders support his quest as a Kamba kingpin, becomes easy for him. But then it becomes very difficult for the general cause of Wiper as a political party, for the simple reason that if you have the leaders join Wiper in the pretext that they will support, Kalonzo Musyoka, the other thing is now you're creating loopholes for other political parties, especially Jubilee, which is perceived to be the enemy, now to come in and, of course, prop these other candidates who are left in these parties whose party leaders joined the fray. Which, in hindsight, if you look at what Mudhama was looking at, I think Mudhama had some, foresight in terms of consolidating the Kamba Nation into one more democratic political party rather than have so many. Multiplicity does not really entrench democracy. But if you have one solid democratic party, then people fight from within. Once they lose, it becomes easy to have the party retain its stature. But if you have people scattered, they lose in the mainstream political party and they still find relevance in small parties.
But Muthama's primary interest is not even about building Wiper as a political party. He's got personal selfish interest. It's well known that he has no time for Dr. Kibuda Kibwana and he has no time for Wavinya Ndeti. So I don't think that he wanted Wiper to be a strong political party because of maybe philosophical considerations or ideological considerations. No, he wanted his friends at the right place. And that's why even today, as we see it, in as much as Justice Odunga said that Wavinya's name must be included, must be gazetted, we are not very sure whether in fact she's going to be the candidate. And there are rumors, word in the streets, that it's actually Muthama who is catalyzing that entire conversation, because for the longest time, he has no time for Wavinya Ndeti. If it was an issue of ideologies that Wavinya is coming to prison...
There's no time for anyone there, does it?
It doesn't seem to have time for anybody.
I want to be fair, in the last election, when Wiper settled on Governor Mutua as their candidate, Mudhama openly rebelled. He might not know that. That's my own count. I know.
I know it very well.
He supported Wavinya up to the end. So when he says for a long time, then that long time must have been after 2013, because it is open.
It
is an open secret that
Mudhama...
That's what I'm trying to say, that it is really not just about him not having time for Wavinya, because in the last election, Mudhama supported Wavinya against Mutua. And actually, it was quite funny because Mudhama was Wiper, Mutua was Wiper. But for that gubernatorial position, he openly went out and campaigned. Actually, part of the reason why Wavinya got more than 90,000 votes was because of the support that he also got from Mudhama. So that it's not personal. When you want to make it look like they've not been seen eye to eye.
So what has changed?
This is what has changed. Mudhama has been fighting Mutua. for all the time, you know that.
Yes.
And Muthama has been very clear that Mutua is a threat to Kalonzo, not to him, because Muthama has never wanted to be governor. And in the process, Mutua actually almost impeached, of course, through proxies in the county assembly, impeached the deputy governor. If you remember very well, Kiala actually was saved by the Senate. It is the Senate that reversed the impeachment of Kiala, the deputy governor. And from that time, they've been working together. Then come the election time, Kalonzo meets Wavinya. They do a pre-election agreement, which almost makes Wavinya the candidate. Muthama is not in the picture. Yet Muthama has been fighting all these battles, and together with Kiala, Kiala has declared interest in this seat, and the party leader is behaving as if he does not exist. That's where the thing started coming up, and that's why they've been challenging this thing. Because if you remember very well, actually at first, this issue of Wiper holding nominations was because of a matter that had been taken to the political parties' dispute tribunal. Initially, they had an agreement that Wavinya is going to fly the flag, and Muthama said, what democracy is this? We've been having people, of course, Kiala, being the
so
main
Muthama
one.
is...
He has a point anyway. So, and I wanted to say something Esbon said. Democracy. You see, you can have one party, but democracy within that party is what is going to ensure that all remain on board. When Wiper starts doing unilateral stuff, because even in Makueni there was a problem, only that in Makueni there was no vocal person as Muthama to bring out the issue. There's this guy who's Lloyd Masika. Masika had shown interest in vying for governor on a Wiper ticket, and he was preempted when Professor Kivuta Kibwana joined Wiper. And actually Muthama has said that much, that you people scared away Masika from Wiper because you clearly showed you had a preferred candidate. And I've told you now the problem with Muthama is that down there, Professor Kivuta has his Muungano party with MCAs and
I'll
with
come
National
and ask
Assembly
you if there's...
members. So
All right,
there's really a problem about internal democracy in Wiper that is bringing all this. It is not just because of, you know, if you ask me, it boils down to the lack of internal democracy.
Was there a problem in Wiper doing what he's saying Muthama did not like choosing what maybe the leadership thought were the big boys and girls in that particular region to be campaigning for Wiper?
Well, you see, I don't see a problem. Going to the Muthama issue now, who stands out as a big player, when he supported Wavinya Ndeti, it's not as if he supported Wavinya Ndeti because he loved Wavinya Ndeti so much. It's because of his passionate dislike for Dr. Mutua. You can support someone not because you really like him, but because you don't like the other person. And when you look at all political parties in Kenya, if you're looking for a political party that has embraced democracy, you will not find a political party in Kenya. Because all the parties you have in Kenya are really a one-man dictatorship. And it's up to Wiper, probably for Kalonzo, where he sits, he could be having more information. And he needed people to assist him secure the Kamba votes. And the case for Masika is well known. But if in the view of the Wiper party leader, if he thinks that Kivuta Kibwana, given that he's the incumbent and he's got very solid support, is the one who is going to bring everybody from Makueni, so be it. If you're unhappy, you have the option of going through the tribunal or anything, or more so, just quit and join another political party altogether. And all these things really, they're not even because of internal democracy. Because when did Muthama realize that there is no democracy within Wiper? If you're unhappy with whatever the party leader is doing, you have the option to resign and take a walk and join Jubilee or join another party.
That is a wrong concept.
I think
that's a wrong notion.
No.
Maybe we need to give...
public.
Where does the buck stop? The buck stops with the party leader. If you're unhappy, you can challenge internal democracies. If you fail,
with the law.
Is
if you
internal
fail, you take a
democracy
walk.
defined? Is it standard?
I think, Ben, we need to give Senator Muthama credit, you know, for advocating for something within NASA that didn't work, and we are thrown into a situation where they have something that the party leader forced on them, which is not working, you know. And I think if you look at Wiper, you know, from the days of ODM Kenya, you'd actually see that the same things have been happening. I mean, in 2007, for instance, I mean, anyone who was losing in ODM was coming to ODM Kenya and was being handed in the ticket, even if it had been given to somebody else democratically. So I don't want to say that probably Muthama had a point that was anchored on ideology, but at this point it is coming out clearly that he had a point that was actually meant to help the political party.
All right. This story is on pages 19 and 20 of the Sunday Standard. Let's hear from Benson Cheserek, of course, who's joining us live from the North Rift, from our Eldoret studios. Benson, good morning. And this topic is already heated, but from where you sit, Which side do you think is having more problems between Jubilee and NASA? I know you're an independent candidate. You lost in the Jubilee nominations. You're running for Marakwet West as an independent candidate. Which side of the political divide has a bigger problem from where you sit?
Thank you, Ben. Good morning, the panelists from here in North Rift. I am an independent candidate from the start. I was never in the Jubilee primaries or any of the nominations, so I decided from the beginning that I will just be an independent candidate. Here in North Rift, Ben and panelists, there's been a lot of political maneuvers over the last few days. And quite frankly, from the look of things, I can see that Jubilee has a lot of massive support. The president and the deputy were in several parts here yesterday. The president started this tour in Chesongoch, Marakwet East, while the president was in my constituency, Marakwet West, a place called Kamoi. And by late evening, you could actually tell that this region is still Jubilee stronghold. So to say who has a upper hand on this region, quite frankly, following the discussions of yesterday and the last few days, there is no doubt that Jubilee still has a massive follow groups that still support here. For NASA, to be honest with you, I've been on the ground in several parts here. Trans Nzoia was an issue. Yes, maybe in Trans Nzoia, but not entirely in the North Rift. So there is a lot of developments here that I think Jubilee has a stronghold. What the president and deputy president have been doing actually over the last few days is just to watch out so that there is no massive fallout. I'm sure you're following what is happening between Governor Mandago and Buseki, and at the same time in Elgeyo Marakwet, Governor Tolgos and Changwony. So there is just that carefulness not to alienate a lot of people, because each and every individual attracts a lot of following. And from the look of things, Jubilee still has a huge follow group here.
We'll talk about Mandago and Buseki and what's happening in Uasin Gishu as well as Elgeyo Marakwet. But independent candidates like you in the Rift Valley, what is your view of Jubilee, for instance? Is there some kind of, I don't know, bitterness, if you can call it that? What is your view as an independent candidate?
Maybe from my own perspective, I think there are some people that saw that the primaries were mismanaged, or rather the nominations. And there is no bitterness between, there is bitterness true from the groups, because each one feels that their candidate should have won. But personally, I have no problem with Jubilee. I will caucus with the president's party once they win. So I cannot tell about other candidates who probably feel that they were cheated in the primaries. And I'm sure it is the same thing in NASA. Following from your panelists, what they say, especially what is happening in the Ukambani, in every faction, actually, there is a lot of bitterness in either side.
All right. That is a story on the Sunday Standard on pages 19 and 20. Fault lines, of course, as all political parties try to present a united front. On the Sunday Nation, gentlemen, Uhuru tycoons raise millions in 2 hours. President urges backers not to support both sides of the political divide as campaign funders in exclusive dinner to mobilize millions for re-election in record time. What is your take on these fundraising dinners?
Well, I'm actually surprised they did not raise billions, because I understand one ticket was going for 10 million. And these are people who are fabulously wealthy who came for that dinner. Because you can imagine how much 10 million is today if you break it down and what it can give you. But I think beyond having such kind of a dinner, which is actually a best practice all over the world, is we need to know who are these people who attended this dinner. And when you decide to give, say, $1 billion to Jubilee, what is the consideration? What do you expect in return? Because I don't think there's a rational man who would do business, make your profits, or even steal money, and give a political party $1 billion without any consideration. Now, we need to establish that so that when you go to vote, say, for NASA or Jubilee, you know the people who are funding the party and what they stand for, because that's fundamentally important.
The media was bad from that event.
Obviously, it was bad because it would not be prudent for the public to identify who are these guys who are giving out $1 billion shillings. If I was doing that party, I wouldn't even alert the media. I would keep them at bay. But we now need to know who are these people who are financing Jubilee and what are their interests. Are they going to hold the political party captive for the next 5 years so that they can get their return on investment? And you know, in other parts of the world, especially in Latin America, you have these cartels, even drugs financing political parties, so that we need to have that information so that when you go to cast your ballot, you know that I'm voting for President Kenyatta, but these are the people who are financing him and these are their interests. If you're going to vote for Raila Odinga, you know these are the people who are financing him. Because, you know, we are told in the 48 rules of power, there's no free lunch. If somebody gives Jubilee $1 billion bob, he would expect to be given some project so that he can get his return on investment. Right. And I think there's more clarity. And as we talk of more clarity, the campaign financing rules, I think they were intended to achieve the right objectives. But as we know Kenya as it is, the politicians again decided to play around with the same. But at the end of the day, really, it would be nice for President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga to disclose who is financing them so that we know if it's a cartel interested, say, in the oil and gas sector, these are the people who are going to influence policy development in oil and gas. If it's in agriculture, we need to know that.
As you say that, also, there's something this kind of power brokers do, that is spreading the risk. If I have 20 million, for example, I go for Uhuru Kenyatta's dinner, I give 10 million. And if Raila Odinga has another dinner, I go there as well and give 10 million. That happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the reason
Even Uhuru
why,
talked about it.
Yeah, that's the main reason why probably the media was given a blackout. And of course, you understand that political parties have this cloud that denies the media that independence, because they give the media information that they want the media to have sometimes when it serves them right. But I think the fundamental thing here is it's not a problem to fund a presidential candidate, even if you're going to do business with the government, you know. And I think if any politician was serious about fighting corruption, they would actually be very clear on who is funding them and what kind of relationship they are going to have. In the sense that when you have everything in the open, even if these people are going to do business with the government, because anyone can do business with the government, there is that clarity that they are doing business with the government because they have what it takes to do business with the government, and it has nothing, you know, that should be hidden under the table. And of course, we will have the same thing for NASA, and it will probably be the same people. I just wish that we had, you know, a very democratic society where people do things that they are proud of, and they can easily talk about the returns that they're getting on whatever they do.
Should Jubilee have made public who these people that are coming to give them millions, hundreds of millions probably?
You know, it's that is, you see, sometimes you would also want to give me something and you wouldn't me to tell about it. And that is a predicament that most of these parties also find themselves, probably for the reasons that is given. Most of them double deal. They give both sides because they want to play safe. Because you see, this is also about interest. Why are these people giving? They are giving because they've probably realized that political patronage has some relationship with business, and they wouldn't want to be locked out because they were not compliant. And because they are not sure who's going to win, they make sure that they're calling them multi-bets nowadays in this era of betting. So you've contributed on this side. So obviously, when someone does that, you wouldn't want it to be known. Because you would want to convince, when they go to NASA, for instance, they would want to convince NASA that we are with you and you're the only one.
Well,
when they
if
go
I'm
to
giving
Jubilee,
you 10 million, that should be convincing enough. But what they're trying to say is
yes,
the transparency of it. Because, I mean...
yeah, that's why I'm trying to explain to you the challenge of transparency. That even the donors themselves have conditions. That I am going to give you this much, but I want it to be kept private. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That is one of the reasons that makes it also very difficult for the political class to manage the transparency around contributions. Because one of the conditions, and I can assure you, one of the most common conditions in these things is that we want to do it discreetly. Are you getting it? It's not like the one I saw the Boniface Mwangi doing, that is all over and being publicized, and it's 10 shillings, and you know that's a mass is appealing to.
I've
this
seen
one
some
is
dinners,
by
fundraising
almost invitation.
dinners by these governors.
Yes.
And they're very open. They are like open. Everybody comes, you see this such and such a person,
Yes.
there's this company, and it's very open. There are those 2-3 who don't want to be
One thing I can assure
mentioned.
you that even in those open ones, there are those who've contributed and didn't want to be mentioned.
Yes,
that I can. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell you. So it's just about how the politician feels is going to be effective in achieving what they want. And one of the things they want to achieve is not to portray integrity in matters fundraising, but to get as much as they as they can. So they are, because of that, they focus with what exactly do we want out of this fundraising? We want money. So how do we do it to ensure that we get the kind of money we want?
Right.
So that forces them to comply with the demands of the people who are bringing the money, which mostly has something to do with privacy. And like Esbon said correctly, that is the main reason why the press was barred from that event.
Somebody has some pundits have said that the reason Jubilee didn't make it very public is because they're just giving a platform to the people who've been doing business with them to pay back, so to speak.
Now, if you say that of Jubilee, then
Not me.
Okay, if the critics if the critics say that of Jubilee,
Yes.
then what would they say of those who also would want to give or who have been given NASA because they've also been getting funding and do not want their names to be known? Because you need to know that NASA has got 24 county governments, so they're also in a position to give favors. So this accusation can be thrown across board. Both of them can be equally guilty of the same. Yeah, so it's a great integrity question. And I want to quote something about, I think Dismas is the one who mentioned about the campaign financing law. What we need to do as a country is to ensure that we have a law that is very clear on how we go about this, how it should be done, who is eligible to give you money and who is not, the amount, and even the transparency involved. I think if we can capture that in law, then it will be very clear on who is doing wrong and who is doing right. I think it should be entrenched in law.
Before I come to you, let's hear what Benson Chesereka has to say. Benson, what is your take on this bit of campaign financing, these fundraising dinners like what we saw with President Uhuru Kenyatta?
Ben and panelists, I think it is actually a very important topic, and the question that I just want to ask is who will they be accountable to? For sure, we may have a lot of laws in the books, and I'm sure even if you check our campaign finance laws, they are there. But what are the limits? Who will be accountable to? Who will be checking in? I mean, if you check, for instance, the United States, how they do the contribution, what actually Boniface Mwangi is doing is something that actually should be embraced in the country. Because when you look at how it is done, it is public contributing. There is an accountability. There is a process. There is transparency. And if we can embrace that going forward, but we have then to set up a structure where it makes sure that you don't abuse it, because you cannot, again, fundraise and then abuse it. One way or another, this is something that has actually messed up our politics in this country, because we don't know who has interest in particular fields. We don't know who has interest in government or in doing business with government. And those are the favors that your panelists are saying there. So I think going forward, if I get the privilege to be in Parliament, I will probably help set up a body with whoever will be elected, so that we can have a transparent system where they can be financing, they can be fundraising without any effect to the running of the government.
Thank you, Benson. Dismas, some of these campaign funding issues have produced some mega scandals happening around election times, including angle leasing and the Golden Bug as well. Shouldn't this make these political outfits even more careful about how they conduct, these fundraisers?
You see, at this stage, what every political party is looking for is resources to campaign. And the legal requirements, the scandals have been given a backseat. Because right now, every political party, presidential candidate, they want to fly around choppers. And it's unlikely that you can do that using your personal resources. That now demands for transparency. And for some reason, our politicians, they come up with legislation where they've got a vested interest in. So that's why they're not able to come up with very solid pieces of legislation. And the president has admitted that the major challenge is that for the last 4.5 years is a procurement-led decision-making process. And if you were transparent on this, and I'd have expected one of these major newsrooms in Kenya to actually pay the 10 million bob, get inside that room and come out with some recording so that we know who is participating in this. Like, for instance, would it not be interesting to establish whether there is any beneficiary of the SGR? Because you understand that SGR has created so many millionaires and billionaires. Right. Would it not be interesting if we lifted the veil of incorporation and know who been the suppliers to SGR and whether or not they were in that fundraising dinner and how much money they've made? Because part of the reason why Kenya we can't grow as an economy, if today I give Jubilee 1 billion bob, assuming that I've got that kind of resource, okay, let's say 10 million bob, I immediately become a shareholder. And if Jubilee retains power, I'll be making those demands because there's no free lunch. And that's why, as a nation, we are not able to achieve our strategic objectives. That's why the public consultation becomes a waste of time. Because if Jubilee retains power today, the people who are going to be deciding on the kind of projects we are going to undertake are the people who gave money last weekend, or rather on Friday. Those are the guys essentially who will be running the nation. The leadership of Jubilee will behave like a puppet because I've given you $1 billion, Bob. I expect a return on that investment. If you do not give me business so that I recover my $1 billion, I make your government a nightmare. I make operations come to a standstill.
All right. Thank you. That's a topic that needs an entire hour to just talk about campaign financing. Let's talk about, lastly, a story on page 23 of this Sunday Nation. Western Kenya is yet again the most sought-after bride. Is it Mutinda? We understand today that is where the president, the Jubilee team, will be trying to, woo people of Bungoma and its environs.
Yes, I think I would agree, and I think the reason why I would want to agree that that is the most sought after region is because, you see, there's how we do our politics in Kenya. We are mostly ethnic-based politics is what we are good at doing. And if you look at the two parties, in Kenya we have the 5 most populous communities. And, one community is represented in Jubilee by His Excellency the President. Then there is the Deputy President also represents one of the top 5. Then when you come to NASA, Raila represents one of the top 5. And Kalonzo represents one of the top 5. So of the top 5 communities, the only community that does not have a representative in the top 2 positions in both the political formations is the Luhya. And we need to appreciate that the Luhya is the second largest community in this country. So if you're looking for a reason why that is the most sought after, it's because NASA feels that they can explain their case, why they could not have given their people the top 2 positions in their coalition. Then Jubilee feels that they have a better case they can make a better case by showing that you people, with all your numbers, are not being given the due recognition in that other political formation. So because of that, both political formations feel like they can make their case in Western Kenya. Unlike in Cumberland, where they have their number 2, or unlike in Kalenjin land, where they have their number 2, in Western, they have been told that they, by the virtue of their numbers, they demand a bigger stake in both political formations, which they are not getting. So each of them is going out of their way to show them that they really have something for them, as much as it is not one of the top 2 positions. I think that probably more than anything else explains.
Yeah.
Yes,
and I think it's a good explanation.
Yes.
Why do you think which side is winning in trying to explain?
I agree with Kavemba's explanation that there is a sense in which you feel that Western is up for grabs because they don't have a representative in either of the 2 popular tickets. But I would want to say it clearly that, to believe that Jubilee has inroads in Western is probably to, think that there is water when you're seeing a mirage. There is no water. I don't think there is anything for Jubilee in Western Kenya, for the simple reason that if you look at the way Western has consolidated itself, under one presidential candidate with a few other people who are probably breaking the law in the name of cabinet secretaries running around drumming up support for Jubilee, I think it's a question of a little bit too late fighting for votes that they ought to have won when they're in government. Because there are 2 things. One, NASA has tried as much as possible and consolidated Western to support the NASA flag bearer. And there are 2, principals from Western Kenya who are supporting the NASA presidential candidate. And I think to that extent, you'd actually understand that for once, Western is consolidated and they're speaking the same language and they're all in the opposition. Now, the second thing is, if you want to say that Jubilee has inroads, you may want to ask yourself, in the last 4 years, what has Jubilee done to Westerners? And you realize that whatever Jubilee has done to Westerners is very little. And Westerners actually remember Jubilee for the few things that they've not done. And the few things that Jubilee has failed to do in Western Kenya actually are magnified and they look like they're very big. And in a sense, I would want to say that apart from Trans Nzoia, which is a lot more cosmopolitan than the other western counties, I don't think Jubilee would even go beyond 7%.
Well, what about those who will tell you there's Ken Lusaka, and there's Eugene Omala, as you say, and they were in Newford, Kenya, which did considerably not so bad in 2013.
You know, Newford, Kenya did considerably well in a region that, you know, the breakaway from Ford, Kenya is strong, and that is Trans Nzoia. And if you look at Trans Nzoia is cosmopolitan. So the number of votes that Newford, Kenya got in Trans Nzoia is actually attributed to the population that is not, you know, Luya in Trans Nzoia. And I can tell you for free, you go to Sabot, you go to Cherangani, there is a high population of Kalenjins, and they would still vote for Jubilee. But it goes without saying that now that Eugene and Ken Lusaka are part of the government, the thing is, what do they have to show for being part of the government? I mean, I think it's very little, and it's misplacing your target if Jubilee is targeting Western Kenya.
Dismas has NASA locked down that 1.9 projected.
Almost to the last man. And in my understanding, Trans Nzoia is actually not in Western Kenya. But when you look at Western Kenya, Jubilee stands accused for so many things, especially around the sugar belt area. They've been accused of not delivering value. And you remember not long ago, President Kenyatta signed a bilateral with Uganda, which complicated the sugar sector for people in Western Kenya. And I understand they will not forgiven him for that. And when you have Musalia Mudavadi coming and working together with Moses Wetangula, and you know the two, they've got a mutual contempt for each other. They don't like each other. But for Musalia Mudavadi to come up with the idea of NASA, Wetangula at some stage was not very happy because he said, I've been with Raila all along, and Musalia Mudavadi just comes, forms NASA, and is being given VIP attention. But eventually they were able to decide to work together for the sake of Mr. Raila Odinga. So when you have Musalia Mudavadi and Wetangula working together, essentially you've got a good part of Western Kenya locked. But again, you cannot underestimate what Eugene Wamalwa is doing. In as much as he's a cabinet secretary today, he's got the potential of upsetting that status quo. But he's been challenged before to show his political muscles by also calling for a meeting at Bukungu Stadium and getting the entire Luya nation represented, working alongside Ababu Namwamba. But no, they've failed to live up to that calling. So it's now very easy to come to the conclusion that as far as NASA is concerned, they've almost locked up Western Kenya. And if you notice the party primaries, when Ken Lusaka was going to present his, when he was doing his papers, there was a bit of commotion, and his running mate actually understand shot in the air and somebody was injured. That tells you the levels of tension. And also a few days ago, President Kenyatta sent out a check for people to be paid. People used to work for pen paper. But people are beginning to say, wait a minute, thanks a lot for giving us this money, but what is actually happening with this facility? Is it working? And questions have been raised around the transaction. There are a gentleman associated with prominent people in Jubilee actually bought pen paper for a song. When you look at the figures, depending on who says, that the amount which was paid is probably 10% of the total value of the entire establishment. So people are beginning to raise those questions. But people in Western Kenya, the Luyas, are beginning to say that for NASA, at least we've been promised that one of our own is going to be a premier cabinet secretary and another one is going to be in the deputy. So if we vote to the last man, then it increases our probability of joining government. And maybe that is giving people a good, I feel good factor.
All right. Yes,
yeah, he spoke about Eugene calling a meeting in Bukungu. To me, that's really not necessary because first, you know, he's a CS. And it's open that he is aligned to Jubilee. So he can't do outright politics by calling.
But he's doing.
He's doing politics.
Have been campaigning every day.
That is really a matter of opinion, and I wouldn't actually dwell on that.
He talks in political rallies.
That's what I'm saying, because let me ask you, if I go and explain what I've done as a water minister, and I am a Jubilee water minister, what will the NASA people say about what I'll be doing, that I'm campaigning? So that's why I say that's really a matter of conjecture. It's a matter of opinion.
People why they should vote for Jubilee.
Because you're part of it. You're part of it. There's no way you're going
You're
to...
technocrats.
You're technocrats. You have to defend what you're doing, and you're doing it on behalf of a government. Some of these things we also need to know where to draw the line.
Are just politicians.
So the thing is,
Joseph
they're
Kino-
political appointees.
is
That I
Joseph-
can say.
is
They're
Joseph-
political appointees.
Is Joseph Kino doing the same in Nyeri? He's doing rallies accompanying the
So
president and
what
telling people
I was
to
trying
vote.
to say is this: Joseph Kony has not called any rally, but he's part of the rallies. So that's why I was saying that Eugene does not need to. What we need to wait for is the results to see whether he delivered or not. And what we can use to gauge whether he has potential to deliver or not is the last election. Because like you're saying, the NASA presidential candidate was still there. He has some sway. Let's give it to him that he has the majority of Western vote. Actually, in Bungoma, he got 51%. But in the same Bungoma, Mudavadi, who was being supported by Eugene Wamalwa and Ken Lusaka, also got more than 2. Actually, 50% of his votes came from the Trans Nzoia, Bungoma, then the Vihiga, Kakamega gave the other, Busia 50%. That shows that there was some influence, because I do not think that those people voted for Mudavadi because of Mudavadi. They voted because of the role that the party leader then, Eugene Wamalwa, and his people played in asking for votes. So the question is this, and that is what I've been saying, and I'll repeat it again. The question is this: now that it might have been probably easier for Eugene Wamalwa to tell his people to support Mudavadi, who was also Aluya.
Right.
Now is a case where he is telling these people to support a Jubilee candidate who is a non-Luya. So what we are waiting to see is how it will go, and that will be determined by the figures. I want to talk about something else about Western, the sugar belt. That is the sugar belt. Most of the sugar belt is in Western region in Nyanza. And there has been issues about Jubilee being blamed. But there are also people in Western who know very well that the person who brought down Mumias, for instance, which is the biggest sugar factory in the region, is the current governor for Nairobi, who is a kingpin in NASA. So when you want to make the sugar wars in Western a Jubilee issue, then the people down there know better than that. They actually some of us are like, if we were to be asked, we would tell NASA not to talk about.
Do you have those facts?
But yes, I have them.
You have those
KPMG,
facts
please, everything is.
But then Jubilee is in government.
KPMG has done an audit.
Jubilee
Who
is in
doesn't know about
government.
that?
What are they doing about
Who
it?
doesn't know that Kidero left Mumias doing better than the company, yet he was an employee? These things are there. They are out there.
I think the question
KPMG, the audit
is,
office,
all right,
parliamentary reports,
It's okay.
they've all talked about this. So it is in public
but Jubilee government formed the executive, so they have the instruments of power. And to the extent
To
that
revive what NASA
to
brought
the
down.
extent that Kidero has not been held culpable, we cannot then say that he's
That's
responsible.
system's failure.
But I think the biggest issue
of
here
public
is
opinion.
if Eugene Wamalwa is campaigning for Jubilee, I think he should be looked at in the sense that he's looking for a position. And therefore, NASA should not be afraid that they don't have a lawyer in their ticket, for the simple reason that if you're looking at 2022, who is providing lawyers with a clear path to the presidency? It is NASA. And to that extent, you realize that
we have to leave it there. We have to leave it there. But I have to ask one question. I have to ask one question. But you say that Eugene cannot hold a meeting because he's a CS. If you were to call it in Bukungu Stadium, will he have that crowd?
He doesn't need to, because Bukungu is not his
But you're not answering the question.
No, the question is this. He
But
can
if
call
he
in poster
was-
grounds. Just let me answer you.
All right.
He doesn't have to do it in Bukungu. That's my point. He can do it in poster grounds in Bungoma. And trust me, he'll have such numbers. Yes.
Ben, when you're talking about the Luya nation, their capital is Kakamega. Their religious, cultural, economic capital is Bukungu.
Eugene is not purported to be the lawyer kingpin.
If you want to demonstrate political capital in Western Kenya, you have to call for a meeting at Bukungu. And if for some reason the CS for water, Eugene Wamalwa, all of us discovered that he could be breaking the rules, that's something he can do through proxies. He can work out a deal with Ababu Namwamba, who is a pure politician, and do that. And going to an issue is raised about Dr. Kidero, which is fundamentally important. If indeed Jubilee says that Kidero is the one who ran down Mumia's sugar, they've been in office for the last about 4.5 years. What action have they taken? So would you say we are going to let Mumias collapse simply because somebody associated with NASA is the one who ran it down, so that we use it as a poster boy for corruption?
Billion. That was an intervention. They've been doing interventions.
You're supposed to make
even
sustainable interventions.
Even in Webuye paper mill, they've tried. You see, the question is,
have they been a success? trying and a success? Have they been a success?
Because,
for the sugarcane farmer, does not want trials.
You have to give grade for effort. You have to give grade for effort as you wait for the result of
But
the
I think
effort.
it is also important to note that you'll be evaluated on failures, not effort. What you just
NASA already failed Mumias. We have already a scorecard for that.
All right, that's where we leave it. Thank you for joining us. That is where we leave it on the political pages this morning. It is 11 a.m. When we come back, we take a look at the politics now. That is, of course, what is happening in the North Rifts in terms of the Jubilee support there, Buzeki versus Mandago, and what has been happening as the president and his deputy try to consolidate that part of their support. But we'll have also a look at what NASA are doing from the campaign trail, state of the race, all that when we come back.